Kyle drags a young woman through the tavern doors and throws her against the bar in front of men. Nobody moves. Amanda rode 50 miles alone to find a document that would stop her pack from being driven off their land. She found it. Now the man who needs it destroyed has her by the arm. Edward stands up from the corner. He does not know Amanda. He does not know about the document, but he has spent his life protecting this territory and is not about to allow a woman to be hurt under his watch, even if she is from a rival pack. New Harrow sits at the edge of the high mountain with one path through which meant only allies were granted access to pass through to the north and the south. Alpha King Edward Calloway likes to travel the path daily. It keeps him in touch with his people and their intimate lives. He likes to rule the kingdom with first-hand knowledge of how the people interact. He observes shoppers as they attend the markets, patrons as they dine at the restaurants, and drunks as they act foolishly at the tavern. He files these observations in the part of his mind where mundane facts may become useful. He tied his horse at the general store and went into the tavern for a cup of coffee. While sitting inconspicuously in the corner, the doors open and a broad-shouldered man enters, moving with the unhurried confidence of someone who thinks he is more important than anyone else. His name was Kyle, and Edward did not know that yet, but he knew the type immediately, the type who did what he wanted, thinking he was above the law. Kyle had a woman by the arm. She looked to be someone of importance, not a servant or an omega. Edward could see that in the way she was dressed and the particular quality of stillness she was maintaining despite being dragged through a tavern door by a man twice her size. She was holding papers against her chest with her free arm pressed flat against her body, with the grip of someone who has decided that whatever else happens, those papers do not leave her hands. Kyle brought her to the bar and said something to her that Edward could not hear from the corner table, and the woman said something back, and Kyle's face changed into the expression that faces change, into when they have been told no and are deciding what to do about no. About 20 men in the tavern registered all of this and made their calculations and settled deeper into their chairs and their conversations and their drinks. Edward watched and waited one more second to be sure of what he was seeing. And then he was sure. Kyle grabbed her arm harder and she pulled back with the specific resistance of someone who is not going to be moved regardless of what the size difference suggests about the outcome. She did not look frightened. She looked determined with the expression of a person who made their decision before they left home that morning and is not going to unmake it because the situation has become difficult. Kyle raised his hand. Edward moved like lightning beside the woman. With a deep, commanding voice, he said, "Take your hand off her." Kyle turned and looked at him with the assessment of a man who is deciding whether what has just appeared in front of him is a problem. He did not realize the man standing there was the Alpha King. However, he did feel an overwhelming sense of dominance radiating from him. He casually said, "Sit down, friend. This is royal business." Edward said, "I know what royal business looks like. This is not it." Kyle's jaw tightened. He said, "Walk away before this becomes your problem, too." Edward looked at him with a deadly stare. He said, "It already is." Then Edward asked the woman if she was hurt. The room went quiet, eager to hear her response. Kyle became impatient. The woman looked at Edward. Something in her expression changed. Not relief, not yet, but the specific adjustment of someone who has been alone in a hostile situation and has just discovered that the situation is slightly less completely hostile than it was a moment ago. She said, "I am not hurt. My name is Amanda. My family is the Wallen Pack of the South Territory. This man is claiming we are on his land, but I have proof." Exasperated, Kyle said, "There is no way she has proof. Only those of the Northern Pack have access to the land records. That's the law." He said it with the flat certainty of a man who thinks he knows the law. Edward looked at him and said, "Who are you?" Kyle said, "Kyle Donnell. I am an honest landowner and investor." Edward heard the name and something moved behind his eyes. Not recognition exactly, more like the awareness that he had just encountered a name he should probably investigate. Kyle stepped back. He did not do it dramatically. He simply stepped back and straightened his coat and looked at the woman one more time with the expression of a man marking something for later rather than abandoning it, and walked out of the tavern without further conversation. The room let out the breath it had been holding. Edward looked at the woman. She was still holding the papers against her chest, still standing at the bar with the posture of someone who had not yet fully processed that the immediate danger had passed. She looked at him and said, "He has given my family 10 days until his wolves attack to move us off the land. Our families have lived on that land and fought for that land for many generations." Edward said, "Follow me." Amanda at that moment decided this stranger is the unexpected ally she needs. They walked out of the tavern together. Edward untethered his horse and began down the street heading toward the castle. As they reached the main gate, Amanda stopped. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, a little concerned. "To my study. I have a copy of all the land records and history of this land," he said. "Your study is in the castle? Who are you?" Her heart began to race. "I am the Alpha King of New Harrow, Edward Calloway." She had felt a certain dominant aura radiating from him, but she didn't expect a king to be mingling with patrons at a tavern. Amanda stepped back, lowering her head. "Your Majesty, I had no idea. I do not mean to involve you in this," she says as a wave of fear overcomes her. She wanted to bring the documents to the authorities, but she was not prepared to go before the king. "Surely you can point me in the right direction to speak to the appropriate party to settle this, so I don't take up any more of your time," she said as calmly as possible. "I am the appropriate party," he said as he motions to her to continue to walk with him through the gates. Let us know what you think about our story, and if you enjoy it, click subscribe so you'll receive notifications when a new audio from Alpha Love Stories Original gets uploaded. Now back to the story. As they are walking, she noticed the stairs. People are not looking at her with malice, but with curiosity. She is not dressed in appropriate attire for someone visiting the castle. She was dressed for comfort and durability, and carried little as she trekked a long way to take care of this business. She stood out, catching everyone's eye. When they entered his large study, she noticed the walls were tall and filled with books, more books than she had ever seen. He motioned her to sit at a large table. She opened the papers she had been holding against her chest the entirety of the trip. Edward read them without speaking. He read them twice, the second time slower than the first. Then he went still. He looked up at her. He said, "Do you know what this does?" She said, "It proves he is a liar." Edward looked at the document and looked at her and said, "It does more than that. It shows that the land he has claimed for the last 20 years, which includes our border, is also your land." Amanda's eyes widened. "Your border is also our land? My father knew he was wrong. He studied the maps, but he never mentioned that." Edward looked at Amanda. He explained it the way he had learned to explain technical evidence to people who needed to act on it rather than just understand it. Not the full complexity, but the specific things that would matter when the documents were reviewed by someone with authority. Amanda listened to all of this with the focused attention of someone who came 50 miles for exactly this kind of information and is not going to miss any of it. Edward said, "Your father was right. This document proves it, and now we must make this right, all of it. I don't know how Donald gained access to the borders, but I am going to find out. We need to get with your father." Amanda agreed. The next morning, Edward called a group of warriors to join him and Amanda for the trek to the Wallen Pack. With a steady pace, they will make the trip in 2 days. During the trip, Amanda asked, "Why are you helping me? All I came for was to show proof that we rightfully own our land. We did not come to gain access to any other. We are content and a peaceful pack who only want to live an honest way." Edward didn't have to think about it. "It's the right thing to do. I have ruled this territory since I was 15 years old and have always ruled with fairness and justice. I care about my people and do not want them taken advantage of. I know you are not part of my territory, but I will not stand aside while you are robbed of what is yours." Amanda was beginning to admire the king, someone who is down to earth, spending time outside of the castle with normal people and actually doing what's right for them and even outsiders. Even though we are allies, the potential of losing a portion of your border would be unheard of by any other pack territory. The king and Amanda arrived at her home. The warrior wolves stayed along the tree lines, keeping a close eye on the homestead and its surroundings. Father, I present Alpha King Edward Calloway of New Harrow. He has some news regarding the land records. Amanda, Edward, and Amanda's father, Matthew, plus a few other family members sat in the parlor. They all listened intensely as the king explained what he had discovered. Do you know how this would have come to pass, Matthew? Edward asked after relaying the discovery. Matthew looked to his wife, Anita, and then his daughter, Amanda. He reluctantly said, Mr. Donnell came to me almost 20 years ago offering to purchase our homestead. At the time, Amanda was only a small child and times were difficult. We compromised on a partial sale. I did not realize it was the border of your territory. I don't know when it came to be, and as the eldest living in the lineage, I don't know how to find out any more information. Edward said, I can attest to the fact that property is our border, but understanding you sold it properly to Donnell, that is concluded. But now I plan to halt this attack on your homestead. You own it outright, and he will not take it from you. Edward stood to leave, headed to the Donnell pack. Wait, I want to go with you. Amanda stood too. You are not needed. I will handle this. No, I have not come this far to stop now. I will go to Donnell and stand up for what is right. I will stand up for my family. She reached to place her hand on his arm. She felt a jolt of electricity and pulled back. She knew what it meant. The king felt it too. His eyes went wide, and then he composed himself. He also felt a sense of pride for her. She was willing to face the aggressive man again. Follow me, then. The group made it to the Donnell pack within just a few hours. The king, surrounded by his men and Amanda standing behind him, were greeted at the door by Donnell's wife. Mrs. Donnell, we are here on royal business. The group was led to a parlor where Kyle joined them. I see you are still in the company of the lying woman. What do you mean when you tell my wife you are here on royal business? Who are you? Edward looked at Kyle coldly. I am Alpha King Edward Calloway of New Harrow. Kyle's eyes grew wide and his jaw dropped. A wave of recognition went through his expression. Your Majesty, I don't know your intention in placing the crown within civil matters, but I can assure you I have done nothing wrong. I purchased the land 20 years ago, and I have allowed them ample time to vacate the property. You purchased a portion of the property, and you know that, the king said matter-of-factly. I did no such thing, Kyle stammered. I would never only purchase part of a property. I am an investor, and I know the value of that property. I wouldn't lose that deal. Oh, but you did, and I will not allow you to force the Wallen pack off their homestead. Kyle looked at Amanda with deep disgust. This woman has deceived you, Your Majesty. You mustn't allow your authority to be overcome by her pretty face. What would your kingdom and your rivals think? A king who makes decisions based on lust. I say that with all due respect, Your Majesty. You are nothing but a liar, Donnell. My father would never sell his home. He may have sold a few acres when times were hard, but he kept our home, and you know that. Amanda was furious. The way Kyle suggested the king was blinded into believing her family. Donnell looked to the king arrogantly. Your Majesty, you must allow me to continue my possession of the property. It is the law. I have heard enough, Donnell. I have reviewed the land records, and you do not own the homestead. You will not take possession, and that is the final ruling from the crown. With wide, angry eyes, Donnell said hastily, You are wrong. Everyone will know the king has sided with a poor woman from an outside pack regarding a border dispute. Everyone will look at you as weak. If you allow this to happen, I have no choice but to announce it within the territory, and it will spread to our rivals. Edward stood then growled, You are a fool! You will not strike the Wallen pack. You will not speak of or harass them. Doing so is a threat against the crown. It will be punishable. Kyle scoffed and stepped back. He was in shock. Very well, your king. Edward motioned for the group to leave. They walked out of the home. As they were walking towards the horses, there was a familiar sound, a sound of bones breaking, indicating shifting into a wolf. Edward turned to see Kyle in the process of shifting while leaping through the air towards Amanda. Before Edward could fully shift, Kyle was on top of her on the ground. She tried to shift, but everything happened so quickly. She could feel the pain and cried out before she could fight back. Edward, with fangs extended, landed on Kyle, biting down on his neck hard. Edward could feel bone giving and then snap. Kyle went limp. Edward let go and stepped back and looked at Amanda, who was sitting on the ground, shaking and bleeding. He quickly shifted back and went to her. He wrapped one arm around and asked where she was hurt. She had scratches along her arms and neck. Edward gathered her in his arms and placed her horseback, and they quickly rode back to her father's home. Amanda woke in her own bed. She didn't notice the pain at first, but as soon as she tried to move, it hit her. There was a sharp pain on her side, and her head felt heavy. "Don't move." She looked to the voice to see Edward sitting in the chair beside her bed. He looked as if he had been sitting there for days without sleep. His eyes were red, and he had a stubble growing. "Why are you still here? How long have I been asleep?" she asked, wondering if she only dreamed about the mate bond. "You have been asleep for 2 days. Your wounds are healing nicely. As far as why am I still here, why would I be anywhere else? You are my mate. I will never leave your side." Tears filled Amanda's eyes. No one had ever spoken to her that way. Honestly, she thought she would never find a mate. Each passing year, she felt like the moon goddess had forgotten her. That's why she was so protective of her pack. She was willing to do anything for their survival, even if it meant she didn't survive. Edward picked up her hand and placed it between his 2 hands. The power surged through them. "When I saw him, I thought I was going to lose you forever. I will destroy anyone who touches you. All the kingdom will know this soon." Amanda smiled and laughed through her tears. She said, "I can't wait for them to know." 2 months later, Amanda, along with her father and mother, are sitting in the king's study. They had just signed an agreement which records the new survey of the land. The Wallen homestead is now part of New Harrow territory, making it the most southern border. "My dear wife, your pack is now under our protection. Anyone who makes a threat against your pack or your land has made a threat against this kingdom. I think it is time to celebrate." He looks at Amanda with mischief in his eyes. "We've done nothing but celebrate since we've been here." She laughs. "It is because everything in our lives is a celebration." "I am so thankful you were dragged into that tavern that day." He laughs. "Well, I am thankful you were in that tavern. Thankful that you are the kind of king that cares about his people, and even people outside of his territory," she says, placing her hand on his jaw. "I will always care for my people, but I will care for you more than anyone else, forever and always." He smiles with nothing but love in his eyes. Thanks for listening. If we can do anything better, let us know in the comments and click subscribe so we can continue to offer audio stories from Alpha Love Stories Original.